hospice of the border life, abandoned sites of Indian villages and deserted fortifications that had been erected by traders to serve for temporary convenience and protection. Nowhere was there a sign of the American interpretation of the word enterprise. On June 26th they reached the mouth of the Kansas River, now marked by Kansas City. There they camped for 2 days; there they fell in with the Kansas Indians, with whom they held a pacific conference; and there the hunters met for the first time with buffalo. 43 days had been consumed in crossing what is now the state of Missouri. July 26th, camp was made at the mouth of the Platte River, 600 miles from St. Louis, where the town of Plattsmouth, Nebraska, stands, and that date marked a radical change in the duties and conduct of the expedition. The disposition of the Indians of the lower Missouri was already pretty well known, so that no time had been spent in establishing relations with them. They were still mostly unspoiled savages, to be sure, but they were acquainted with the appearance of the whites, at least, and their bearing toward traders and colonists had been for the most part decent. But the situation upon the upper Missouri was altogether different. Although the problem might not be definitely stated, because many of its factors were unknown, it could be foreseen that a solution would tax the genius of civilization. The dominant nations of the Plains Indians, those whose numerical strength and warlike character made them feared by their neighbors, had their domain above the Platte. The Sioux, in particular, had a mighty reputation, established by treachery and ferocity in war. Their history recorded a constant succession of cruel wars, most of which had had no justification save in arrogance and bloody-mindedness. They did not want to live at peace, for peace signified to them a state of craven inanition. The mission of Lewis and Clark was directed pointedly against that manner of behavior. They were not only to secure themselves against hostility, but were also to endeavor to reconcile the warring tribes and nations to one another. That was an undertaking calling for a high degree of tact and courage. From a camp a few miles above the Platte, where the party remained for several days, messengers were sent to the villages of the Pawnees and Otoes, 50 miles to the westward, bearing gifts with an invitation to a council. Through wars and other disasters, the Otoes were then much reduced in numbers, as in almost every item of the savage code of efficiency and independence. In their weakened state they had formed an alliance with the Pawnees, a primitive adaptation of the idea of a protectorate. The Pawnees had considerable strength, and they were in character much above the Indian average, living in permanent villages, where they sustained themselves by cultivating cornfields and hunting the buffalo. After carefully reconnoitering the lower Platte Valley and the surrounding country, the expedition passed onward, traveling slowly to allow the Indians to overtake them. On the 27th they passed the present site of Omaha, and on the 30th encamped at a point 12 or 15 miles to the north. It was this camp, pitched where the village of Calhoun, Nebraska, now stands, that received the name of Council Bluff, which was later appropriated by an Iowa town. Here, on August 2nd, appeared a small band of Otoes and Missouris, with a Frenchman who resided among them. Presents were exchanged, and the officers requested a council upon the following morning. August 3rd. This morning the Indians, with their 6 chiefs, were all assembled under an awning formed with the mainsail, in presence of all our party, paraded for the occasion. A speech was then made announcing to them the change in the government, our promise of protection, and advice as to their future conduct. All the 6 chiefs replied to our speech, each in his turn, according to rank. They expressed their joy at the change in the government, their hopes that we would recommend them to their Great Father, the President, that they might obtain trade and necessities. They wanted arms as well for hunting as for defense, and asked our mediations between them and the Mahas, with whom they are now at war. We promised to do so, and wished some of them to accompany us to that nation, which they declined, for fear of being killed by them. We then proceeded to distribute our presents. The Grand Chief of the nation not being of the party, we sent him a flag, a medal, and some ornaments for clothing. To the 6 chiefs who were present, we gave a medal of the 2nd grade to one Otoe chief and one Missouri chief, a medal of the 3rd grade to 2 inferior chiefs of each nation, the customary mode of recognizing a chief being to place a medal round his neck, which is considered among his tribe as a proof of his consideration abroad. Each of these medals was accompanied by a present of paint, garters, and cloth ornaments of dress, and to these we added a canister of powder, a bottle of whiskey, and a few presents to the whole, which appeared to make them perfectly satisfied. The air gun, too, was fired, and astonished them greatly. This was the first important conference with the natives. If it was not rich in results, it served at least the temporary purpose of putting these allied tribes in a good humor by satisfying their sense of their own dignity. Nothing more was to be expected. It is well to say outright, as a commentary upon all meetings such as this, that no council with Indians, however ceremonious or solemn, has results more permanent than those which attend the purely diplomatic relations of civilized nations. In all our intercourse with the Indians, from the very beginning, too much stress has been laid upon the importance and the binding obligation of formal powwows. We have been unduly conscious of our own cunning, while undervaluing the craft that is native to all wild peoples. We have too often lost sight of the one really imperative element in any compact that is to be effective and enduring: mutuality of honorable purpose. Most men, whether civilized or savage, can appreciate honest motives and behavior, and so can they detect dishonest wiles and artifices. Lewis and Clark knew well enough what was before them. The Indians' past experience with the light-minded French and the evil-minded Spanish adventurers of the border had left a deep impression. It had made them wary, if not distrustful, of white men's protestations. This impression was not to be removed by merely sitting around in a circle and making speeches. It could only be removed by long and intimate association in the affairs of actual life. If the whites meant well, they would do well, argued the Indians. To do well was a matter of time. The most that Lewis and Clark hoped for was to establish peace with the natives, to prepare the way for confidence and trust. Meanwhile, they knew that they would need to be constantly upon their guard. On August 19th, one of the non-commissioned officers, Sergeant Charles Floyd, was taken ill, and on the next day he died. This was the only death to occur in the party throughout the course of the expedition. The entries in Captain Clark's journals for those 2 days are thoroughly characteristic of him. August 19. Sergeant Lloyd is taken very bad all at once with the bilious chorlick. We attempt to relieve him without success as yet. He gets worse, and we are much alarmed at his situation. All attention to him. August 20. Sergeant Floyd much weaker and no better. Died with a great deal of composure. Before his death he said to me, "I am going away. I want you to write me a letter." We buried him on top of the bluff, 1/2 mile below a small river, to which we gave his name. He was buried with the honors of war much lamented. A cedar post, with the name Sergeant C. Floyd, died here 20th August 1804, was fixed at the head of his grave. This man at all times gave us proofs